Okay, today is amazingly, is the 15th Yahrzeit of our Rebbe, Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal. Hard to believe it's been 15 years. But certainly Rav Noach would tell us that every event, every occasion, certainly every obligation is an opportunity for growth. What are we here for? What are we on planet Earth to do? We're here to grow. And therefore, every halacha, every mitzvah, every element of Yiddishkeit is really a different opportunity for growth. And certainly a Yahrzeit, particularly a Yahrzeit of your Rebbe, the Yahrzeit of the founder of HaTorah, the Yahrzeit of, certainly one of the men who can be given the credit for a tshuva movement to whatever degree you would agree that there is a tshuva movement, but all that's happened in the last 50, 60 years of Bali tshuva in the world, certainly Rav Noach Weinberg gets a large amount of that credit. And therefore his Yahrzeit is a very special time and a very special opportunity. In what way? Typically a Yahrzeit is a very private affair. Family members, a spouse, children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters. But a man of Rav Noach's stature, his Yahrzeit really transcends the typical Yahrzeit of a family member and really is an opportunity for Klal Yisrael, and certainly for people sitting in this base medrash where every brick of this building was inspired by him and he's responsible for. Certainly this is an opportunity for us to really reflect upon who he was, what he accomplished, and what we can learn from him. This is echoing. Yeah. I'll move it away a little bit. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to say that a Yahrzeit is in time what a kever is in space, what a grave is in space. That everyone knows that there's an Indian to go to Kivrei Tzadikim, you go to the cave of a great person, that there's an opportunity to feel closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to use that to daven. People come to the Kotel. That's the greatest example, that the Shekhinah is here. But it's also on a much lesser level. But to go to the kever of a Yahrzeit, of a great person, there's an opportunity. We can be opened up. We can be lifted. That's in space. A Yahrzeit, Chazal tell us, is in time. There's an opportunity this day that the presence of this person somehow is here more than on any other day of the year. We can feel his presence, we can feel his impact, we can connect to him in a way that you can't do at any other time. So that's really, in many ways, the opportunity of what we have today as a way of helping us grow. So I want to, many of you, most of you have probably never met Rav Noach Weinberg, so I'm going to give you a little bit of family background, because I think it's true that, similar to most great people, Rav Noach did not exist in a vacuum. He came from a place. He came from a family, and I think that by knowing the context of where he came from, it helps to understand and explain who Rav Noach Weinberg was. I'm going to focus on his father. Rav Noach's father was a man by the name of Yitzhak Matasyahu Weinberg. He was a Yerushalmi. He was born here. His grandfather was the Yesod Avoda. That was the Sefer he wrote. He was the first Slonim Rebbe. And he was a highly unusual man. For example, he got married at the age of 13 because he believed that, as the Torah says, when you're 13 years old, you are a man, and therefore I'm going to first get married. And after he got married, he never took a dime from any other person. He was very committed to learning. He was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Learning was his life, but he worked. He didn't believe in going to Kollel because he didn't believe it was appropriate to be supported. I'm not advocating that position, I'm just explaining who this man was. He moved to Tiberias, and he opened up a flour mill on the Kinneret. The water of the Kinneret was used as the energy source to power his mill. And the story goes that as the mill would work, it would bring water from the Kinneret, that very often fish would end up being caught in the mill as it brought the water in. And the local Arabs would come and fish from the mill, and it was very dangerous. And apparently what happened is that one time an Arab woman was fishing there, she fell into the mill and she died. She was killed. At that time, this is the early 1900s, the Turks were in control of the land of Israel. And they arrested Rav Matasiyahu, Rav Noach's father, but luckily, for some strange reason, he had a Russian passport. And at that time in history, it was before World War I, at that time in history, the Russians and the Turks were aligned. So they let him go. World War I broke out, and now the Russians and the Turks were on opposite sides of the war. And therefore, someone sent Rabbi Rav Weinberg a message that tomorrow the Turks are going to come and arrest you. You should escape. And he bought a horse and he rode on horseback from Israel, eventually to Egypt. In Egypt, he took a boat to New York, where he set up a business. And after a few years of being in New York, he had enough money to bring his family from Eretz Yisrael. Rav Noach Weinberg was born in the Lower East Side of America because of that Arab woman that died in a mill in Tveria. So just like Chazal say, Ish Mitzri, in describing Moshe, that in some way that Arab woman, somehow the Hashgacha had it, that she was one of the reasons that led to Rav Noach being an American, speaking English, but more than that, understanding American culture, understanding Americans, which made it possible for him to really do what he did in trying to reach out to Americans and fight assimilation. So his father died when he was 16 years old. His father died during the Sheva Brachas of his older brother, Rav Yaakov Weinberg. Rav Yaakov Weinberg eventually married the daughter of Rav Ruderman, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael in Baltimore. Rav Yaakov Weinberg himself eventually became the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael. And Rav Noach looked at him, that he was his primary Rebbe. And during the Sheva Brachas of Rav Yaakov Weinberg, his older brother, Rav Noach's father died suddenly. He had an appendicitis attack, and he was stricken, and he died. So Rav Noach, at that point, felt that he was 16, 17 years old. He didn't feel that it was appropriate to take money from an almana. That's how he explained it. And in the summers, during Bein Hazmanim, he would go to work. And he would sell shmatas. He would sell fabrics to various different Jewish businesses across America. And he would travel far outside New York. And he did business with Jews, and they were very, as he explained it, very taken with a young yeshiva bucker trying to make a buck. And they were very receptive to him, and he did business. He made money for the year in those Bein Hazmanims. But he would explain that typically he would talk to the people that he was trying to sell to. And they were not religious, and he would ask them about how they feel about being Jewish, and they're connected to Judaism. And he said universally they were all fiercely proud of being Jewish. It meant a lot to them. It was a very important part of their lives, even though they were not observant, or not all that observant. But being Jewish was something very, very, very dear to them. And he would ask them, can you explain to me why? And inevitably, they all had a very difficult time explaining, well, what is it exactly that they find so important about their relationship to Yiddishkeit? And he realized very quickly that if they can't explain it, then they're never going to be able to transfer it to their children, and certainly not to their grandchildren. And he realized that if you step back, and this is in the 1950s, and you see where American Jewry is at, 6 million Jews in America right after the Holocaust, and he realized that they're headed towards the precipice. Of course, there's millions of Jews now, but they have no idea what it means to be a Jew or why it's important. And that means they're heading towards the cliff. And it's only a matter of time before we lose millions of Jews. And the fact of the matter is that in 2023, what Rav Noach saw in 1953 is exactly, unfortunately, despite all the accomplishments of the Tshuva movement, is exactly what happened. Because today, in 2023, if you look at the statistics, there's also 6 million Jews in America, give or take. How could that be? In 1953, right, 70 years before, there were 6 million Jews. Those 6 million Jews should have flowered into can speak to Rabbi Palatnik, 12 million, 18 million, a lot more than 6 million. So what happened? Because those 6 million, they're gone. They're all assimilated. So how are there 6 million now? It's by immigration. They're Russians, they're Bukharans, they're Persians, they're Israeli Yordim, they're families whose father's not Jewish, the mother's Jewish. But to find Jews, young Jews like yourselves, that have 2 Jewish parents in America is almost impossible. So much so that my children don't like this, but often when I have guys from different yeshivas over with, Bali Tshuva background, I ask them, tell me your family history. And I show my kids, you see, none of them have 2 Jewish American parents. One time on a Friday night, a guy says, yeah, I'm in Philadelphia. And he says, yeah, both my parents are American and Jewish. I said, it's unbelievable. I said, you're the first guy in years I've had at my Shabbos table that has 2 Jewish American parents. He says, yeah, I grew up frum and I went off the derech. I said, okay, that explains that. But Rav Noach saw what was coming. Part of Rav Noach's greatness is that he didn't just say, so what could be done about it? This is a catastrophe waiting to happen. I guess, it's just really a shame. But Rav Noach was activated. He didn't just look away. So he decided in 1953 to come to Eretz Yisrael because he wanted to consult with the Gadol Hador. And in his mind, who was the Gadol Hador? The Gadol Hador was the Chazon Ish in Bnei Brak. He was the leader of the Jewish people, certainly Haredi Jewry, and he wanted to ask him what should be done. And he got on a boat and he came to Eretz Yisrael, only to find out that when he arrived in Eretz Yisrael, that unfortunately the Chazon Ish had died while he was on his way to Israel. So he got to Israel and he was taken by the whole experience here, and he went to learn in the Mir Yeshiva. And he learned for a few years in the Mir Yeshiva. He eventually went back to New York, got married to Rav Weinberg, and they came back to Israel and they settled in Israel. And that's when Rav Noach basically said to himself, look, b'makom she'ein ish, hishtadel lios ish. In a place where there are no men, where no one's really facing this challenge properly, what am I going to do? I'm going to undertake to try to do something for Klal Yisrael. I'm going to dedicate my life to this monster called assimilation and try to make a dent. Although certainly his vision was much more than a dent. Certainly he was reaching to solve the crisis of assimilation, but that's what he decided to do. In 1966 was when he felt ready. I'm going to open up the first yeshiva. Rav Noach opened up 4 yeshivas, HaTorah being the 4th. The first was called Magen Avraham, which was in Bnei Brak. He obviously did not have a good marketing team. Why he chose to locate the first yeshiva in Bnei Brak is a bit of a question, but whatever. I'm sure there were some practical considerations. But that was the first yeshiva. Second was in 1967, a yeshiva that closed because of the 6-day war called Mevaseret Zion. Then came Shema Yisrael, which eventually changed its name to Or Sameach, which still exists today. And then eventually in 1974, he opened up HaTorah. And that's when he really hit pay dirt, and his ideas and his concepts and his effort to really make his concept of Yeshiva B'lai Tshuva really took off. But I guess it was around 1965 when he wanted to open up the first yeshiva, as the halakha says, the Rambam described as someone who's considered to be cholik on his Rav, is somebody who opens up and starts teaching yeshiva and starts teaching Torah without getting permission from his Rav. So he went to the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, who was Reb Lezer Yudel Finkel, the son of the alter from Slobodka, and he spoke to him about what he wanted to do. And Reb Lezer Yudel could not understand what Rav Noach was talking about. He said, tell me again, explain it to me. How is this going to work? He says, finally, it's sort of the light bulb went off. He said, I got it. You want to make a factory for Bali Tshuva, that they're going to come in one end as non-religious Jews, they're going to go through this process, and you're going to graduate them as Orthodox Jews. Is that right? Rav Noach says, that's it. And he said to him, you're crazy, right? It's never been done before. It's impossible. So Rav Noach said to him, he said, Rebbe, with all due respect, he quoted him a Gemara. He quoted a Gemara in Pesachim. And the Gemara says as follows. If you want to look it up, it's on Daf Mem Tes Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Tana Rebbe Chia, Kol ha'osek b'Torah lifnei amaretz, anybody who's engaged in learning Torah before amaretz, someone who's uneducated, ki'ilu boil arusaso b'fanav. It's as if he's having a relationship with his fiancée in front of him. Shenemar says, Torah tziva lanu moirasha, al tikre morasha el murasa. It's not an inheritance, it's his fiancée. That Rav Noach was saying to the Rosh Yeshiva, that I understand that even someone who looks completely disconnected, a million miles away from Torah, in his neshama, he's burning to know Torah and to be close to a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the definition of a Jew. And that's what the Gemara is saying. It's as if he's boil harusaso. That what more could a person feel belongs to him, that he wants. That's a non-from Jew's relationship with Torah. Reb Eliezer Yudo was taken aback. And he said to him, he paused, he said, listen, if you believe that, if you really believe that, you live that, then you'll be successful. And he gave him a bracha. That was a paradigm shifting moment in Jewish history. And that really, in many ways, encapsulates the essence of Rav Noach, which was a combination of a belief in what it means to be a Jew, an understanding of what is the inner core of every Jew. Don't be distracted by what you see. It's irrelevant. They're confused as anything, and what you see on the outside, don't be gurus that. Go beyond that. Understand who they are. And he understood that, and he also understood the power of Torah. The power of Torah and how Torah can transform even people that are so far away, so disconnected. But it can trigger them, it can ignite their ruchnias, it can ignite their neshamas, and it can bring even those so far away close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it was those yesodot, it was those understandings and those appreciations that really made up the foundation of his hashkafa, his worldview, of who he was. That was the Aish HaTorah. You get it? That was the fire of Torah that burnt in Rav Noach's heart. And that's what fueled and fanned all of his activities for Klal Yisrael for the next 50 years. That's in its essence. I want to focus now on a few core ideas that made a very big impact on me in spending time with Rav Noach, and I think made a very big impact on most people who came to Aish HaTorah. The first is that Rav Noach invented a term. He didn't exactly invent it, but we say it every day in Davening. In Shachris, we refer to the Torah. We define Torah as Torah's Chaim. Rav Noach translated that as instructions for living. What is Torah? It's instructions for living. Most people, when they teach Torah, they're focused on one of three different areas. The most basic, and arguably the most common, is halacha. You're learning Torah. What is the end point? What does the Torah ask me to do? Keep the mitzvahs, halacha. A second is, we'll say it's a little bit, I would say deeper perhaps, but people are focused on the metaphysics. What is the underlying spiritual system? We know there's Eser Sfiros, Kabbalah, that there's a whole matrix of spiritual ideas. And some people are very focused on that. Rav Noach was not focused on either of those two. Rav Noach was focused, I'm going to use a word and then define it. Rav Noach was focused on hashkafa. What does it mean, hashkafa? He was focused on showing people that every single aspect of Torah is Torah's Chaim. It's instructions for living. What does that mean? That every mitzvah, every halacha, every piece of Torah, every word, if understood properly, could be distilled and understood as a lesson to help me become the person I need to become. Whether it's in my midos, whether it's in my hashkafas, whether it's in my values, that all of this is aimed at teaching me how to grow, how to become great, how to become the person that I can become, how to become the person that I'm obligated to become. That was Rav Noach's approach. That was part of his greatness, and that was his primary method in kiruv, because he knew if you teach halacha, non-frum people are not interested in halakha. They're not interested in knowing how to observe the mitzvahs of the Torah. So that's not going to get me anywhere. But every human being wants to be great. Every human being wants to activate and actualize their potential. Every human being wants fulfillment. It's completely universal. You can't be human and not want those things. They go hand in hand. And therefore, if I can show them and I can reposition Torah as a tremendous resource for helping them in that personal pursuit that they all have, then now they're going to listen to me and they're going to appreciate Torah and they're going to want to learn Torah. And that's what he did. Whether it was through the 48 Ways to Wisdom, which was a very powerful way, which he showed people from 48 different vantage points, the wisdom of Judaism, whether it was his foundation series, 5 Levels of Pleasure, 5 Levels of Free Will. He had many curriculums that he created, but this was his approach. And everybody who learned by him and learned in HaTorah and opened up kiruv institutions around the world or taught here, all of us learned that skill. We knew that what skill are we trying to learn by being graduates of HaTorah and going into the quote-unquote the effort of kiruv? It's how to make Torah relevant. This was his definition. Make it relevant, show them that which looks completely foreign, completely obscure, completely irrelevant, it's rich with wisdom, it's rich with relevance, it's explaining Torah and life to you in a way that you never imagined possible. And that was a revolution. And for anyone who met Rav Noach and spent time in HaTorah, that was the profound paradigm shift that all of us went through. Because we came in thinking it's nonsense, with all due respect, and after a short while, realizing it's gold. It's an unbelievable resource. I may not want to be frum, but certainly it did not take long for people to appreciate the genius and the wisdom of Torah. That was Rav Noach, that was his approach, that was his strategy, that was HaTorah. I'll give you just one example. There's many examples. But we all know that on Pesach, before Yom Tov, we have a chiyuv of bir chametz. You've got to get rid of the chametz, right? So Chazal tell us there's 3 ways to destroy chametz. What are they? One is fire, bir chametz, mamish. Second is you can rip it up and throw it into the wind. And the third is to throw it into the ocean, right? 3 ways. So Rav Noach took this teaching and he showed you how it's relevant for life. It's speaking to us. Why? Because he explained there's 3 types of people. There's 3 basic orientations that people have. Some people seek wisdom, understanding. They want to understand. Another seeks pleasure. They want to enjoy. They want fulfillment. That's their frequency. And a third is responsible, discipline, do the right thing. These are 3 fundamental frequencies in which people operate on. And we get this from the Avos. Yaakov Avinu was Torah, understanding. Yitzchak Avinu was responsibility. He was a korban dedicated to the cause. And Avram Avinu was chesed, the pleasure of giving, connecting to Hashem. These are the 3 prototypes of every Jew. So he explained that chametz is the Yetzer Hara, and saying that each one needs to know their frequency because each one has a different strategy in terms of fighting the Yetzer Hara. Ripping it up, that's Yitzchak Avinu. His strength in fighting the Yetzer Hara is discipline, responsibility. To awaken his sense of responsibility, his desire to be responsible, that's his best weapon to hold off the suggestions of the Yetzer Hara. Avram Avinu was pleasure. How does a pleasure seeker avoid the temptations of the Yetzer Hara? Drown them in the ocean of greater pleasures. Realize whatever benefit, whatever titillation you think you get from this physical world, it's just a speck of dust. It's nonsense compared to the infinite eternity of dveikus and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Drown whatever pleasure Olam Hazeh seems to give you into the far greater and expansive pleasure of Ruchnias, of eternity. And the last one is Bir Chametz, because Bir Chametz is the L'chadchila. Because the first method, use responsible discipline, it exists, but you're ignoring it. Drowning in greater pleasures is also, it exists, but you're ignoring it. Bir Chametz completely destroys it. That's understanding. Because if you understand that it's sheker, it's not real, it won't give you fulfillment, it won't give you any satisfaction, then you've completely defeated it. You've negated it completely. You've burnt it up. It no longer exists. And that's the ideal, that through understanding, you can really realize that what the Yetzer Hara seems to be offering is nonsense, it's sheker, it does not pay. So this is just one example of taking a statement by Chazal, a teaching of Torah, which is very halachic in its orientation, and showing you that there's a much deeper level, that it's really helping us become better and greater people. It's an example of Torah's Chaim. Rav Noach could do this anywhere, any Chazal, any Gemara, whatever it would be, and he would encourage us that when you're learning, at the end of the day, ask yourself, okay, so what did I learn today? This is what I learned. How could I put this into a context where what I learned today is a message that can help me be a better person, grow in my basic fundamental obligations, whether it's midos, hashkafa, values, whatever it may be. That was his approach. That's one idea. And that is a shift. You have to appreciate that's a shift. That changes how people look at Torah and changes how they look at doing kiruv and what their goal is in teaching Torah. It's a certain way of looking at the Torah and how to position it that is very empowering for those who learn it this way and very empowering for those who teach it. This is a paradigm shift. You appreciate that? Okay, another one is Mesilas Yesharim. So with Mesilas Yesharim, I know that Rav Noach once told me that Chovos Levavos, he learned 70 times. I assume he learned the Mesilas Yesharim more than that, because that was really his primary, I'll call it Musar Sefer, but his primary resource in terms of shaping, his personal growth. And Rav Noach would often quote, in the very first chapter, the Ramchal, chapter is called Ma Chovaso B'Olamo, what is man's obligation, purpose in this world? And the Ramchal doesn't dilly-dally around. In the second parak, he gets right to the point and says, right, that Chazal teaches, Sha'adam lo nivra ela lisaneg al Hashem v'lehenus maziv shkinaso. That man was not created, ela to take pleasure in God and to enjoy the divine radiance. He had to explain why twice, but he focused on this point. Ha'adam lo nivra ela is a double negative. The Vilna Gaon said that when he saw the Mesilas Yesharim, that if the Ramchal was still alive, he would walk from Vilna, which is in Russia, to Padua, Italy, where the Ramchal lived, to learn it at his feet. Because in the first, 8 or 9 chapters, he said, there's not an extra word in the entire Mesilas Yesharim. This is the Vilna Gaon. But this is a very clumsy sentence. Ha'adam lo nivra ella, a double negative. Just say, ha'adam nivra, lisaneg al Hashem, v'lehenus b'shivasa. Say it direct. Every basic instructor of writing will tell you, say it simply, clearly. Don't be complicated. That's a fundamental to writing. You can ask my brother, the resident editor here. In any event, so what does it mean? So Rav Noach would explain. Ha'adam lo nivra ella, the Ramchal was afraid that if he didn't emphasize this point, we would end up being confused. That we would not realize that there is a singular purpose behind creation. Singular purpose. There are many important obligations, but there's a singular purpose to creation, and that is Ha'adam lo nivra ella lisaneg al Hashem. Don't forget that. Of course, there's many obligations. There's many crucial obligations, but don't confuse obligations with the reason for existence. Those are two separate things. But just to sharpen it a little bit, despite the definitiveness of the Ramchal, it's still confusing. It's still a little bit unclear. Why? Because all of us have been exposed to many statements by great Gedolim or Chazal themselves that seem to contradict the Ramchal's articulation of the purpose of life. I'll give you a few examples. 5 very quickly. Number 1, the Vilna Gaon himself says in his Sefer Even Shlema that the entire purpose of existence is to perfect one's midos. Oh, so that's my purpose. Got to work on midos. Okay? Rabbi Kiva said, Klal Gadol b'Torah, v'hafta recha kamocha, ze klal Gadol b'Torah. The fundamental principle of Yiddishkeit is the mitzvah of Avos Reim. You got to love people, take care of them properly. We say every morning in Birkas HaShachar that Talmud Torah keneged kulam. And that's the rallying cry of the yeshiva world, that Torah is clearly the preeminent mitzvah. Keneged all the other mitzvahs combined. That's not the Ramchal. 4th is we have sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos. The chinuch and the Chavetz Chaim and the Bir Halakha brings that there are sheish mitzvahs, 6 mitzvahs, that a Jew has to work on fulfilling every moment that they are awake. Oh, that's our goal. And finally, the very last statement of Pirkei Avos is, right? Shekol ma shekadosh baruch hu bara lo bara lechvodo. That everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made in this world, lo bara el lechvodo, for His honor. What's the purpose of existence? Kvod Shemayim, Kiddush Hashem. So which way is it? Lisaneg al Hashem, Midos, Avos Reim, Talmud Torah, Kiddush Hashem, Sheish Mitzvahs? It's confusing. So, to clarify, it's very simple if you think about it. There's 2 ways to look at one's purpose. From Hashem's perspective, why did He make this world? That's the Ramchal, and that's what Rav Noach taught us. Lisaneg al Hashem. Hashem, the infinite creator of the universe, made this world to give mankind, and in particular the Jewish people, the opportunity for the greatest accomplishment, period, which is a relationship with Him, because He is the infinite. There can be nothing greater than to connect to the infinite. That's what Hashem made this world for, to give us that opportunity. But our job is to turn ourselves into a type of person that has the ability to get that experience. Being connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't just come because you wake up in the morning and says, hey, that makes a lot of sense. I'd like to be connected to the infinite. Great, no problem. It takes work. This is what we're doing in this base medrash. This base medrash is a factory that's trying to refine us to become the type of person that can be able to have a meaningful connection with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that entails 5 different areas. Number 1, what's our job? You got to work on your midos. That's the foundation of everything. Derech Eretz Kadma l'Torah. Number 2 is you got to care for people, Avos Reim. Number 3, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. That's the most important tool we have to change us to becoming a person that can connect to God. Every word of Torah that we know makes us a little bit closer and a little bit more similar to God. Hashem is the ultimate Talmud Chacham, Kaviyachol. To every piece of Torah that we understand calibrates us ever so slightly to become more aligned with Him, more similar with Him. Sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos. This is what we need to work on to understand the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who is Hashem? What does it mean to have a relationship with Hashem? Who is He? How do I understand Him? How do I connect to Him? How do I relate to Him? What does all that mean? And then Kiddush Hashem is, in certain ways, the essence. Because if we get involved in the business of Kiddush Hashem, then we are being mishtatif with Hashem's purpose. We're His partner in trying to change this world. So there's 2 perspectives. Why did Hashem make the world? The ultimate gift, the ultimate pleasure, Lisaneg al Hashem. What's our job? We've got to change and become a type of person that can connect to Hashem in these 5 ways. Each one is a different way that we emulate Hashem, and we become more and more aligned with Him and more similar to Him, and that's what makes it possible for us to have this relationship. There are many people that talk about the second category, Midos, Avos Ram, certainly Talmud Torah. Again, that's the rallying cry of the Yeshiva world. Kiddush Hashem, Sheish Mitzvahs, a little bit more than it was 50 years ago. But Rav Noach understood, you need to understand these 5 jobs that we have and what we're trying to become in the context of the overall picture. That's the Ramchal. All of these jobs are important because they are different strategies that enable us to accomplish our purpose of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Noach's paradigm shift was to always explain our basic fundamental responsibilities and obligations in the context of the overall purpose. Otherwise, you can get lost in a certain tunnel and think, this is what it means to be a Torah Jew. And if you don't understand it in the greater context, it can limit your real understanding of not only that particular obligation, whatever it may be, but how it fits into the whole picture, the entire perspective. So it's very important to always remember that the ultimate goal, the ultimate reason for creation is Hashem put us here to understand Him, to have a relationship with Him. We have to work on our midos, to have a relationship with Him. We have to work on Avos Reim, Ben Am L'Chaver, because of a relationship with Him. Talmud Torah, a relationship with Him. Sheish Mitzvahs, obviously a relationship with Him. And Kiddush Hashem. These are all pulling towards the same ultimate goal of being connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you understand these responsibilities in that context, it changes our appreciation of each of these areas and their importance and how they work. That's a paradigm shift, okay? I think it is. I hope you do as well. I have 5 more minutes, that's okay? Okay, the last one is one of the Sheish Mitzvahs, the second of the Aseret Dibros, is Lo Yilucha Elohim Acherim, not to believe in other gods. And this is in many ways, everybody knows that Rav Noach was an entrepreneur. You know, a big part of my job when I was the CEO of HaTorah was keeping people out of Rav Noach's office. Because Daniel can tell you as well, that every Tom, Dick, and Harry who had a good idea for Klal Yisrael and needed some money came knocking on Rav Noach's door. So, some of the ideas were good, and believe me, Rav Noach invested in many other people's ideas, yeshivas. I personally was involved with Rav Noach in raising millions of dollars, bli guzma, for other organizations, institutions, yeshivas, chadarim even, certainly, ideas for Klal Yisrael. Millions of dollars. Rav Noach was not limited to just, the 4 walls of HaTorah. He was dealing with Klal Yisrael. Even Or Sameach, right? And everyone knows that HaTorah was born from a disagreement between the founders or the directors of Or Sameach and Rav Noach eventually left in 1964. But there was a time in the early 90s that Or Sameach made a decision that they were going to close their Israeli kollel. And Mr. Ben Zion Hochstein, who was a legendary philanthropist living here in Yerushalayim, he was the president of 18 organizations, including HaTorah, Or Sameach, and Nevei Yerushalayim. He had a real soft spot for Bali Tshuva, and he was a major supporter of all these institutions, called Rav Noach and said, look, I feel terrible. They don't have money. They're going to close their Israeli kollel. Rav Noach, do you know somebody who would be willing to fund them? So Rav Noach said, tell them, I'll pay for the first 2 years if they commit to keep it open afterwards. You hear that? So they asked Rav Noach, there's a little bit of tension between the various parties. And they asked Rav Noach, ad kedei kach, you're going to fund Or Sameach's Israeli kollel? He said, well, how do you deal Torah Ladira? To me, it's all the same. What does it matter? They sit in this building, or they sit in that building, 2 miles down the road. It doesn't matter. It's all Torah. That was Rav Noach. But part of his entrepreneurial spirit was, he believed in Hashem. He took Hashem seriously. So he had a line, and this is one of his phrases within the midst of Licha. I can't is avodah zarah. If you say I can't, it's avodah zarah. What does that mean? So I'm going to explain to you how he explained it in 48 ways. So the number 7 of the 48 ways is anava, humility. So Rav Noach would explain that if you ask a Western person to depict a humble man, describe him for us. What does he look like? What's he like? He says, oh, a humble man, he's this old guy, he shuffles in, doesn't have much kayach, doesn't want to be noticed, sits in the back of the room, quiet, within himself, defeated. That's the humble man. He says, okay, what's the Torah's concept of a humble man? We know that Moshe Rabbeinu, right, was the greatest Anav that ever lived. The Torah itself, Hashem has made that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Anav that ever lived. The Medrash says that if you were in Moshe's presence, he felt as if he was 10 amos tall, 30 amos tall. A giant. He was bigger than life. Incredible charisma. So there's a very different view. I'm not going to explain that Western concept of an Anav. He's a balgaiva. He's arrogant. He's arrogant? Yeah, he's arrogant. Why? Because 50 years before you see him today, he was a young man who wanted to change the world. He was idealistic. He was passionate. He was upset about all the ills of modern society. He was going to change the world. And what happened? He got out there. It wasn't so simple. Not every wealthy person in the world was willing to open their door and just write a big check to help him with the finances. Not everybody agreed with him. His own people, his teammates, his colleagues, there were disagreements, there was fights, it was challenging. They couldn't make a dent, people weren't receptive. Not so simple. And as this persisted, he eventually gave up and he quit. And he was defeated by life. That's a balgaiva. Why? Because when he asked himself, what are my resources? Took an inventory. What are my resources that I have at my disposal to change this world? All he saw was himself, me. How smart am I? How determined am I? How responsible am I? How charismatic am I? So if I take my resources, my abilities, and I compare them to the world's problem, bang, I'm finished. I don't have a chance. But Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of Klal Yisrael, was never defeated. He never was worn out. He never experienced burnout. He was full of life, dynamic, to the end of his life. Why? Because when he looked at the world's problems, and they were complicated, when he looked at the world's problems, he said, listen, what are my resources? Very simple. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I have the infinite creative universe on my side. Everything is a walk in the park. We can make it. Now you have to appreciate, this is both an incredibly empowering idea, an incredibly dangerous idea. It's incredibly empowering if you really take it to learn humility. I'm nothing. It's all Hashem. If you learn that lesson, then it's the greatest power. And that will fuel you for your entire life that we can do it, we can be optimistic, we can make a difference. Always. But, as Rav Yaakov Weinberg said, the Gemara says, Tov shebarofim gehenim. The best of doctors go to hell. Because they think it's their power. I healed him. They're arrogant. And Rav Yaakov Weinberg once said to me, if you think Tov shebarofim gehenim, those who change people spiritually, alachas kama v'kama. A doctor is arrogant because he saved him physically. But a Rebbe, a Rosh Yeshiva, a Mekarev, become even more arrogant because they think, I saved his soul. That's the most dangerous thing. So this idea that we have the Almighty with us can be the greatest idea, it can empower us, but only if we learn from it to be humble. It's not me. But we can abuse it and use it to think that we're Superman. The Almighty's with me, so I can do it all. That's the ultimate ego trip, the ultimate arrogance. You hear? I'll end with this. So the Beis Halevi explains, what do you have to do to have the schus, the merit of Hashem choosing you as his kli? And he explains, in the Beis Halevi al HaTorah in Parshas Yisro, and he explains a pasuk in Tehillim. It's Perek Samaches, pasuk Yutes, and the pasuk says like this. It's describing Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Har Sinai and getting the Torah. It says, Alisa Lamarom, you went up on high to Har Sinai, and you did three things. Shavisa Shevi, you captured a captive. V'lekachta, you purchased it. Matanos ba'adam, the gifts of man. So the Beis Halevi asked, this is a three-way contradiction. Which way was it? How did you get Torah? You captured it, you bought it, or was it a gift? Which way is it? He said all three are true, and there's three dargot, there's three levels of acquisition of Torah. The first basic one is like capturing a captive. It's called willpower, determination. Learning Torah is important. You take that responsibility, you take it seriously. Seder is Seder, you work hard, you do Chazorah, you take it as a serious responsibility, you're determined. But that has a glass ceiling. It only gets you so far. If you really want Torah, you got to buy it. How do you buy it? You have to refine your midos. The only place in all of Torah, Torah Shebaal Peh, Torah Shebiksav, where Torah is described as an acquisition, is the Mem Ches Dvarim SheTorah Niknas Behem, in the 48 ways that Torah is acquired through them. 6th chapter, 6th Mishnah, Pirkei Avos. What is the contents of the 48 ways? Many of them seem to have nothing to do with learning Torah. They're midos. They're character traits. That's what Chazal, that's what David HaMelech is teaching us. You want real Torah, you want it even more than just what your determination can get, you got to refine yourself. You got to really become a kli that's appropriate. The more you change yourself, the more you're similar to Hashem, then the more you're going to be able to understand and receive His Torah. You got to do that work. Change your midos. That gets you the second darga. What's the ultimate level? That at a certain point in time, it's a matana. The Almighty gives it to you. What's more than that? Chazal tell us that the number one ingredient to knowing Torah is a nava. What's your motivation? Not just your midos. What's your motivation? Is it about you? You want people to think you're smart, you're brilliant, say a great shir. You want the status of being a Rebbe, a Rosh Yeshiva, a Makarev. What are you in it for? What's motivating you? What's driving you? If it's L'Shem Shemayim, I want to do Hashem's will. I want other Jews to be close to Hashem. I want to be close to Hashem. You have that anava, that motivation. That opens us up more than anything else to really be Makabel Torah. I would like to add on that it's not just in Torah, but it's in all spiritual pursuits, have these three different dargot. There's determination, there's refinement of midos, and there's the refinement of motivation to be L'Shem Shemayim. That's what we need to take with us, we need to know that yes, it's true, Hashem is with us. Hashem is not happy with the state of world affairs. And it's getting worse. And everybody knows we're in danger. We are in trouble. The Jewish people are in trouble. And Baruch Hashem, we have an army and we have many resources. But don't be fooled by that. This is all about Hashem's relationship with Klal Yisrael. That's certainly what Rav Noach would tell us. And if we want to engage HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us fix the world and straighten out the world and give people what they need, He's waiting. But we need to become that kli. And that kli means becoming determined, refining our midos, and perfecting our motivation to be L'Shem Shemayim. And if we can use this Yahrzeit as an opportunity to take that message to heart and to dedicate ourselves to working on these three areas, that more than anything else will enable us to receive Hashem's bracha and support, and certainly that will be a great tribute to our Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Weinberg. Thank you.